Other people talk about God like he's so close and so personal. They say things like, God spoke to me, or I felt his presence. And maybe you've wondered, why don't I experience God like that? Why does he feel like the God of everyone else, but not of me? And if you've ever prayed for healing that didn't come, or begged for direction and felt silence, you'll know what it's like to wrestle with God. The Bible doesn't hide that struggle. In fact, it gives us a story where wrestling with God is the very thing that changes a man's life forever. So let's look at Jacob's story found in Genesis 32 and 35. And in Genesis 32 verse 9, we see the start of Jacob's prayer to God. And then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. We see Jacob begins by calling him the God of his fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. In other words, their God, not really his. But then comes the night, and we pick up again from verse 24. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that the hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. And the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. And Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? Then he blessed him there. Jacob is left alone, and a man wrestles with him until daybreak. Most of this isn't symbolic. It's an all-night physical and exhausting struggle. But Jacob understands that this is too important to give up on. This is a true make or break moment for him, and he refuses to let go until he receives a blessing. By the end, Jacob walks away limping, but also renamed. God calls him Israel, which means he struggles with God. That limp became a permanent reminder that an encounter with God changes you. And sometimes he leaves us with scars to testify to his presence. Later in Genesis 35, God confirms Jacob's new name and his new life. Jacob no longer just knows the God of his father. He knows his own personal God. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. So there's a pattern of wrestling in Scripture. Jacob wasn't alone in wrestling with God. In the book of Job, we see the entire book is Job wrestling with God, asking why, demanding answers, and pouring out his pain to God constantly. Habakkuk cries out, how long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Yet by the end he says, the sovereign Lord is my strength. And even we see Jesus wrestling with God in the Garden of Gethsemane. On the night before the cross, he prayed, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. Do you notice the pattern? Jacob wrestles all night before meeting Esau. Job wrestles before he sees God's glory. Habakkuk wrestles before declaring God as his strength. And Jesus wrestles before the cross. Every great turning point in Scripture seems to come after a struggle. It's important we now look at what wrestling really means. We need to be clear that wrestling with God is not the same as angrily shaking your fist at him. It's not rebellion, it's relationship. It's bringing your doubts, your fears, your frustrations honestly before him. It's saying, God, I don't understand, but I'm not going to let go of you. And it's always followed by submission. So we see with Jesus, not my will, but yours be done. You don't have to pretend that you've got everything under control. That's God's job, not yours. So why did Jesus have to go through with it? That cup he was praying about in Gethsemane was the cup of God's wrath against sin, the judgment we deserved. And Jesus took it so that we wouldn't have to. His act of wrestling shows us that salvation wasn't easy. It was costly. But because he submitted, we can wrestle and still be held. The gospel is this: Jesus took the cup so that we could take the blessing. He carried the cross so that we could carry his name. So what are we to do with all of this? Well, this week, instead of hiding in your doubts and frustrations, bring them to God in prayer. Write them down, speak them out, wrestle honestly. And then, like Jacob, refuse to let go until you see his blessing. Because wrestling with God isn't a sign of weak faith. It's a sign of an active, living faith. So maybe you feel like God is the God of everyone else. Maybe you're in the middle of your own all-night struggle. Don't let go too soon. Keep wrestling, because the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob wants to be your God too. And if you've never made him your God, just like Jacob did on that night, you can. The same Jesus who wrestled in Gethsemane went to the cross for you. And he invites you not just to know about him, but to know him personally. And sometimes that limp you carry will be the very proof that he met you there.